Welcome to episode 3 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined in studio, as always, by my co-host, my teammate, my longtime friend, and my colleague here at Grace College and Theological Seminary, the one, the only, John Sloat.
Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. We are entering, this is, week 3 of the academic semester, or the session here at Grace?
The session at Grace, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, week 3.
So, and you're not teaching anything this session?
Nope, mostly on the road, back half of weeks in Florida in February, Asia in the end of February. So.
And you just got back last week from
I was in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
I was in Pittsburgh for 3 days.
Yeah. The Tampa of the South, the Tampa of the Midwest, right?
Yeah. Maybe without the beach or, ocean, but
right,
the Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay. Kind of returning to part of your roots. You have varied roots.
Yeah. I went to high school in Pittsburgh, so it was good to go back there. It was good to visit my alma mater, do some recruitment, visit a few other Christian schools. I got to speak at one in Donegal, Pennsylvania, which was nowhere. And then drove back here to Indiana, and I got a chance to speak at a youth retreat this weekend, and that was a wonderful experience. It was awesome.
Excellent. Well, we want to remind our listeners that if you want to get in touch with us, you can connect with us on Twitter. We are at V&S Pod. And we also have an email address that you can reach out and get in touch with us. That is variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and this week, I guess based on our episode from last week, one listener, we'll call him Dave in Oregon.
Dave in Oregon, yes.
Who we both know and love.
Yes.
Had some thoughts on our episode and our conversation about evangelicals leaving, millennials leaving traditional evangelical churches and going to more liturgical churches.
Yes.
And we mentioned it briefly. We talked about how we fear liturgical churches can be a bit ritualistic and fall into monotony and those sorts of things.
Yes.
And I think Dave gave us some helpful pushback. And so
agreed.
I'll read a brief part of what he said. First of all, he had great greetings for us and loved the podcast and listens to it while he makes bread in the morning.
Yeah, if we move towards the sponsorship end of things, we might need to have a conversation with Dave in Oregon.
Dave in Oregon about we'd love some free bread swag, and
it's probably hard to get that here in a timely fashion, though.
Well, we're big in Oregon.
That's right.
Well, anyway, he said this. You raised one point several times, and I'd like to offer a little pushback. Multiple times throughout the episode, you mentioned that liturgical worship runs the risk of becoming a sort of empty ritualism. I don't have any argument there. It clearly can. But I would like to say that low church styles of worship are equally susceptible to this danger. They too have routines, forms, and turns of phrases that can become empty words and motions. Evangelicalism has its rituals too, but without the benefit of cool robes.
Yes.
Which was very Dave from Oregon.
Dave, yes.
I appreciated that pushback, and I think he's right. I think
that's fair.
I think evangelicals in low church settings do have a liturgy of sorts. It's just far more casual.
Yes.
And but I think it can become ritualism as well.
Sure. And I think that especially when you understand sort of liturgy in one sense, broadly understood as any consistent pattern you're using on a regular basis in your worship context, then almost every sort of worship setting that has a consistent time of meeting has a liturgy in that sense.
Sure.
Now, that term tends to be used more specifically of higher church forms of worship where it's, much more, we have a very regulated, we have this reading and then there's this kind of prayer. And then we sing a song and then there's this kind of scripture reading from this part of the Bible. And that tends to be how, but completely agree with Dave. And so appreciate the the warm and friendly pushback on that.
Yeah, and if you would like to have an email read on the air, we don't guarantee that.
That's true.
But if you write as good of an email as Dave in Oregon, we would welcome any pushback or comments or thoughts, and you might even get read on air. So
that's a possibility. Yeah,
that's exciting.
Go ahead and reach out to us. And we are just coming off a weekend where the AFC and NFC conference championship games were played, and so now we have our Super Bowl set. We've got the Chiefs from the AFC and the 49ers from the NFC. Any quick thoughts on the conference championship games? Because I figure next episode we'll probably
do a Super
Bowl
Yeah.
mini preview or something like that.
No, not really. They weren't particularly exciting games. I mean, the best part was Tennessee was up 17-7, I think, at one point over the Chiefs. But other than that, the Chiefs rolled and the 49ers rolled. And it was not the most exciting games I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Not the most compelling television, to be sure.
Yeah.
So, well, as we move into one of our primary topics today, it is sports related. But for our listeners who are not necessarily big time sports fans,
Stick with us.
Stick with us because we have another. We are gonna talk not just about the sports angle of this, but we also have another. In one sense, a broadly related ministry topic that will tie into this, but
And the sports topic is getting play nationally, like on news, regular news outlets, not just sports news outlets,
right, not just ESPN or FS1 or something.
And so I think even if you're not a sports fan, you can appreciate what's going on or think about it more deeply.
Sure. And so that topic is the massive cheating scandal in the world of Major League Baseball.
Yeah. So to recap, sort of what's happened in, I believe, the 2017 season.
I think that's right. Yep.
The Houston Astros, halfway through the season, and the Houston Astros were known to be a very good team.
Yeah.
Came to the decision that they could do a better job of stealing signs.
Right. And maybe we should just clarify what that means and how that fits into the larger context of baseball.
So every pitch that's thrown from the pitcher, he'll throw different kinds of pitches, whether it's a slow pitch, whether it's a fast pitch, whether it has a curve to it or not. So the catcher knows where to catch it. So the catcher will throw down a sign underneath him, usually indicated by a certain number of fingers or sequenced fingers. The pitcher will then accept the sign, and throw the pitch. The batter usually has no idea what's coming.
Right.
Unless if there's a man on, let's say, second base,
right,
and he's able to figure out what the signs are, relay it to the batter somehow, what pitch is coming, that's called sign stealing and is an accepted part of baseball.
At some level, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify, if you're not a baseball fan, the difference in being able to know what's coming is that you have to make a decision within less than a second of whether you're going to swing at a pitch when it's coming from the pitcher. So if you know whether it's going to be a fastball or a slower pitch like a changeup or a curveball or something, that's a huge strategic advantage in at least having a sense of what's coming.
And what the Astros did in 2017 was bench coach, somebody on the coaching staff named Alex Cora put a camera in center field that was focused on the catcher giving signs.
Right.
Once that sign was accepted, somebody in the clubhouse would see that camera and see that sign
on a monitor in the hallway just outside the dugout.
And had a trash can and a baseball bat, and which I think is hysterical.
Yeah,
would bang on the trash can to indicate what kind of pitch was coming.
Right,
and the batter could hear the trash can. Now, Twitter was used to uncover this, so people on Twitter have gone back and watched clips of these games and can hear the banging of the trash can.
Right.
And this differs from somebody on second stealing signs because of the use of technology,
right.
The distinct advantage it gives them. So MLB, I think famously, was asked about it. I believe A.J. Hinch, the manager, was asked about it right after the World Series.
Back in 2017.
Back in 2017. and which is the same as 2017, and said, and somebody asked me, he goes, "Well, that's ridiculous. These guys are in there working hard every day." MLB did an investigation, suspended him and his boss, the GM, for 1 year from baseball, and the Astros owner turned around and fired both of them.
Correct.
Now, the Red Sox also, if you can't tell, I'm passionate about this topic. I love it. The Red Sox were also caught in a cheating scandal in the middle, I believe, of the 2018 season.
Yeah, that's right.
Using an Apple Watch as part of their cheating somehow. I don't fully understand it. That's still under investigation. But the Red Sox have parted ways with Alex Cora, who got hired based on the World Series win from the Houston Astros in 2017.
Yeah.
And the Mets manager was also fired, mutually parted.
Mutually agreed to part ways, yes.
After a large donation was made to his charity. And he was a player on that 2017 Astros team.
Right.
That's the basic lay of the land.
Correct. And so, there's a lot of interesting pieces here. And one thing I'll just add is that they're still looking into, or at least there's I don't know if MLB is technically looking into this, but there are still accusations that the Astros had technology, not just the cameras, but had wearable technology of some kind that would maybe buzz or give an alert while the batter was at the plate to let him know, here's a fastball, here's a curveball.
I think
that has not been definitively established, though there's lots of accusations. And
in the investigation, they looked into wearables, and I believe MLB came back and said, Major League Baseball came back and said, we see no evidence of wearables.
Right.
But there is some awkward behavior that happens. So
suspicious.
Yeah, Jose Altuve, who is a lot of fun to watch. I mean, he's one of the smallest baseball players in the league.
Yeah.
Hits a game-winning home run. He's coming home and he's saying, "Don't rip off my shirt. Don't rip off my shirt," which is kind of a tradition of baseball, where you hit a walk-off home run, they rip off your shirt.
Yeah.
And people were saying that they didn't want him to do he didn't want his shirt ripped off because it would show a buzzer underneath.
Right.
He claims that his wife didn't like it when his shirt got ripped off.
Okay. That's a little hard to believe. So, and just to clarify, the penalties from Major League Baseball, 1 year suspension for the Astros manager, A.J. Hinch, who was then subsequently fired.
Yes.
The GM was also suspended for 1 year and fired. So even if another team wanted to hire them, they couldn't hire them for a year. And then there's an assistant general manager who was suspended for a year as well. The Astros lost their first and second round draft picks for the next 2 years, and the team was fined $5 million, which is the maximum under Major League Baseball's constitution.
Yeah.
Do you think that was enough?
No, I think the World Series needs to be vacated. If they use this for the entirety of the 2017 season or a good portion of it, certainly through the playoffs, we have audio that proves it. Major League Baseball has agreed. I think the World Series needs to be vacated.
Which is interesting in because that just doesn't happen in professional sports. That's just unprecedented. Now that's different in college sports.
Happens in college sports, yeah.
Happens not regularly, but I mean, I think it was Louisville.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, got ahead of myself there. Louisville had their national championship vacated from 2013 or whenever it was because of the scandal surrounding their program. And, you can argue whether that does anything because it doesn't automatically then grant the national championship to the runner-up that year, which was actually that team up north.
Right.
But that's not to say that it's a meaningless penalty. But it's not like, I forget who the Astros beat that year. Do you remember who the Astros beat in 2017?
Dodgers.
Okay. So that doesn't mean that the Dodgers suddenly become the 2017 World Series champs. It just, no one won it that year, basically.
Right.
That's how that works, essentially.
And I saw because the Astros beat the Yankees to get there, and some Yankee fans, because Yankee fans are Yankee fans, started going like, well, we should get it. We should.
Yeah.
No, that's stupid. You vacate it, nobody gets it.
Okay, so part of my question is, and we texted about this a little bit.
We did text, and
where does this fit in the sort of history of scandal in baseball? Because baseball has a long history to begin with,
Yeah.
and a lot of scandals of
Yeah.
varying levels of severity and such. And so I'll let you make your case.
Yeah.
Where does it fit?
Yeah. I mean, but I think this is the biggest scandal in baseball history.
Okay, and explain to me why you think that is.
So the major scandals that I'll talk about, the Black Sox, I believe of 1919,
Yep,
who threw the World Series.
correct.
They threw a World Series, and several of the players that threw the World Series played amazing. And so their cheating and scandal caused them to lose the World Series, not to win. That's why I think the Astros is a bigger scandal. Second, the second one that I think of is steroids. And I've seen a number of pitchers come out and say, I would rather face somebody that's juiced rather than somebody who knows what pitch is coming.
Yeah.
So I think it's bigger than that. And then I also think it's bigger than Pete Rose because I think Pete Rose was sort of doing things on his own. This was an organizational cheating that was happening.
Right.
So I think that's my 2 cents. This is an organizational cheating that was taking place in the game of baseball. I think the World Series should be vacated to show the severity.
Right. And I think we could I'm not sure what I think about vacating the World Series. I'd be fine with that. I think I could go either way. But I would disagree that this is bigger than the Black Sox scandal of 1919. And some of the primary reasons that I don't think it's bigger than that, which I'll mention, by the way, there is a great podcast series on the 1919 Black Sox. They're the Chicago White Sox, but because of their scandal, they've been labeled the Black Sox by a podcast called Infamous America, which has a whole season on the 1919.
Yeah, I've listened to it. It's quite good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Here's why I don't think it's bigger than that, though it's not far off. So I'll give you that. It's not like it's. I'm not saying it's ridiculous to say it's as big or bigger. My point is that scandal resulted in profound and major changes to the game that lasted for the rest of this since then. In other words, the office of the commissioner came into being because of that particular scandal. And the fact that you had federal grand juries involved, to me, takes it to a whole new level of this is not just about baseball. This is about something that gets into the federal courts when it comes to gambling and that sort of thing. So
that happened with steroids as well.
There was testimony before Congress, but that's not federal grand juries. Those are pretty different. You can be,
That's true.
Our own president has been called in to testify before a House subcommittee about things he's doing, not in a good way, in a very good way, like, hey, you're being innovative. We want to hear from you. So the Congress can call anybody in there to talk about something.
Our president of the college, all of a sudden I was thinking you were talking about the president of the United States. I was like, really?
No.
And that was news to me. I thought we were needing to play a breaking news number real quick. Okay.
So anyway, I think that Black Sox scandal is still bigger because of that. But in any case,
I think it remains to be seen what comes of this
true.
and what change. Like this is still a developing story.
It is developing. That's fair. But here's the question: why? Why the cheating? And this is where we're trying to pull back our folks who are like, I'm not a big sports fan. Help me out here, Doc.
Yeah. I mean, my simple answer is ego. Like I want to be a winner. I want to be the best. I want to have the championship, even though I know that I didn't necessarily earn it.
And I would add, there's huge amounts of money at stake.
There is a ton of money. Yes.
And that's even been mentioned by some of the players who are outraged by this, of saying, look, that costs people bonuses and incentives and stuff and such like that. That can affect people's contracts or whether they're brought back or not when they lose those kind of big games like that, or a pitcher who gets lit up by one of these players who knows what pitch is coming, that could and maybe did, I don't know, you'd have to maybe demonstrate that to me, but could affect their contract status or, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. And I've seen pitchers come out and say and I think it's important to remember also that the players of the Astros, and I didn't know this until I read an article this week, said MLB went to them and said, we will give you full immunity if you tell us everything. And so that's the only reason MLB got anywhere in this investigation. And so the players aren't being punished at all.
Right. And that's caused a good bit of outrage that you've got these some current and then former Astros players who will not get punished at all because of that move. And again, that's the classic dilemma that investigators often face in any context, right? You may not get information, so you offer immunity to someone to get more information, but then everyone's outraged because a key player does not get punished at all.
Yes.
So, but as we thought about this particular issue of cheating in baseball, it led me to think, what is an area where there's a sort of a parallel in when it comes to ministry? And what came to my mind, and what we'll spend some time talking about now, is pastors or preachers who plagiarize sermons.
Yeah.
That they are, in essence, at some level, cheating. They're not perhaps following through on what their responsibilities are when it comes to the calling of their ministry.
Now, when we say plagiarizing a sermon, what are we talking about? What do we mean by that? Like, would you mind defining that for me, just real quick?
Yeah, I think that taking and we'll talk about degrees about this as we move on in through this topic, but we'll start with a pastor takes a sermon that was preached by someone else.
Sure.
Whether they listen to it online or whether they get the manuscript somehow, or maybe it's a book chapter or something. And then they go into the pulpit and preach that sermon with those exact words, or basically those exact words, and do not in any way acknowledge that they are using the words of somebody else. Yeah. So someone likes a Rick Warren sermon, and they go and take it, and then they, say, well, maybe they change a few words here and there, but basically they go into the pulpit, and that's not a knock on Rick Warren. I'm just picking a popular pastor, so I'm not saying that he, encourages the practice. It could be John Piper, it could be Matt Chandler, it could be anybody.
Yeah, everybody in this age of internet and being able to search through things is easily plagiarized. Yeah,
and so I think that's in one sense a pretty easy and clear example, though there are still plenty of pastors, and I know of one in particular, who when confronted about this particular practice, someone went to him and said, I was listening to your sermon, I had read a book by an author, and it was basically word for word, and you never said anything about using this, but it was like word for word for long stretches. And when confronted, the pastor said, well, I just think it's really good and helpful, and so I don't see any problem with it.
Yeah, there's sort of this feeling that pastors and ministers have a different set of rules when it comes to plagiarism.
Yeah.
Where, as your Philippians commentary, for instance, if large pieces of that were seen to be, taken from so-and-so, it'd be pulled off shelves, you would be discredited, you would, I don't even know what else would happen to you. You would lose credibility in the academy in a lot of ways. It'd be a huge problem. Yeah,
it would. And so in one sense, I think that's an obvious example. And as we did some show prep, I think it was helpfully sort of broken down in at least a couple of the articles. One by, and we'll post links to this. There's a Gospel Coalition article that then has like 5 sublinks to what does Don Carson think, what does Tim Keller think, what do others think on this, and they basically a lot of these articles boiled it down to there's two primary issues on that. They're stealing. You're taking what someone else has produced,
Yeah.
and you're presenting it as yours. You're taking something that doesn't belong to you and presenting it as yours. And then there's cheating, that you're essentially claiming credit for something that you didn't create.
Yeah.
And I think those are helpful categories to put it in terms of, but it was quite striking as you read through their responses, the variation of their intensity when it comes to condemning the practice.
Yes. And I think some of that is just personality driven.
Some of it is, yeah. I mean, Don Carson basically starts his off with, if you're doing this, you're disqualified. You should either resign or be fired immediately.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the lead line in there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your good friend Tim Keller.
Yeah, good friend. Yeah.
It's like, well, it's more complicated than that, and not that he disagrees with Don, but he deals, I think, with more shades of gray in his response.
So let's talk about some of those shades of gray.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I'll throw out. How about this? How about I throw out something that a preacher might do, and you let me know your thoughts and feelings on it in the world of preachers.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's toss you a softball.
Okay.
Preacher copies and pastes a Charles Spurgeon sermon and reads it word for word Sunday morning.
And does not in any way indicate
not indicate that it's him. Yeah.
Clearly wrong. And I think an egregious breach of his pastoral duties. Though, quite frankly, if he's taking Charles Spurgeon word for word, that should be pretty evident pretty quick with some of the 19th century English. That's
fair. That's fair.
So maybe like a John Piper or a Tim Keller
Sure.
would be a more contemporary example where it's not as easy to maybe discern that from the language.
Okay. So there's that. What if a pastor goes out, listens to a famous preacher, whoever it may be. This famous preacher tells a story. This preacher goes, I like that story, tells it as their own story.
So let me just clarify, because I think the clarification matters. Does the preacher is it a first person story? Meaning that, a famous preacher says, I was in, the coffee shop and then I had this conversation with so-and-so, and then non-famous preacher lifts it and presents it as their own story.
Yes, that one.
That is not right. That is dishonest.
Yeah.
And is a breach of, I think, faithful preaching.
Yeah, and I think we're on the same page on that.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're going to get into a little bit more gray.
Okay.
Let's say somebody goes out. Here's a sermon by John Piper. Goes, I like the structure of that sermon, and I'm preaching a similar passage coming up. Can he use the same point headings?
So the same main points, same structure.
The same outline. Let's say it's
point 1, God loves you. Point 2, you should love God. Point 3.
Let's do it all together.
Right. It's a terrible outline, but
yes.
If the preacher is going to do that, I'm okay with that. But I think he should acknowledge that he has borrowed the outline. Now, and this is this might hit a little closer to home for me, because in my Philippians commentary, I give suggested preaching.
Oh, interesting.
Outlines.
Yes.
Or at least main points.
Yes. So you're almost like saying, use this in a lot of ways in your comment. Is that a fair assessment of why it's in there?
I'm saying use this. I try to clarify that it's only suggested and only to give ideas. It's, I'm not saying, and I make it clear, like, this is not the only faithful way to preach this passage. It's probably not even the best way to preach it. It's if I were going to preach it, or if I have preached it, this is what I did. And I got some pushback from one particular friend about including those.
Really?
Over his concern about
this issue.
This kind of thing, that you're doing too much work for the pastor. And I took that into consideration, but ultimately decided that I don't think that's the case. Now, so again, I think that if you acknowledge that you're borrowing the outline, I think it's fine. And I think part of what can fix a lot of this is doing your own work on the front end before you go to those resources.
Yeah.
That doing your own work and getting your own idea of how you think the passage hangs together, how you want to preach it, and getting that in place, at least at a sort of rough sort of framework structural level, and then going to commentaries or listening to other pastors who preach the passage, going, oh, that's really good. I could really use that. Or I think I could still go with mine,
Yeah. And I think that I got into a practice where I think lots of seminary students go through. When I was going through seminary, I would listen regularly to a lot of preaching, and loved it. And I found that when I was listening to this preaching, it became like I would take on attributes of some of these preachers, and I actually had to stop listening to sermons of passages I was getting ready to teach on or preach because I was so influenced by some of these sermons.
And that's fair, though. At the same time, I believe it's this point is made in both the in the 9 Marks article or answer that I read about this, as well as the even Don Carson's response.
Way to cite your source, by the way.
I'm trying really hard not to violate.
That'd be embarrassing. Yeah,
is that there is a sense in which the influence of someone can be so pervasive, or even just so that when you read a lot or when you're exposed to a lot, you can legitimately not remember where that expression or that phraseology or even those ideas came to you from. And that makes it challenging, even if you want to acknowledge that you probably got those ideas from that person. So I think on the preaching end, there is a practical nature to this that we're not saying. I think we can speak. I think I can speak for you on this.
Go ahead.
What we're not saying is that every other paragraph, every other sentence, you got to be like, well, I first learned about God's glory from Jonathan Edwards or John Piper or whoever it might be. We're not saying that, because that makes for a clunky experience.
I think you can go. My goodness, I used to think one way about this topic, and then I began to work through this guy's work, and I feel greatly influenced by that, and I have a great deal of credit to give to them based on my thinking here. So lots of what you hear,
Absolutely.
You could say that, and you come off as humble, you come off as giving credit,
right.
And you come off as well read, which I think is an important part as well.
Right, and I think that there are just a number of easy ways that you can simply do this, even in a spoken form of communication, even if it's on an outline, to say, as I was preparing, I came across this sermon by Tim Keller, and he organized the passage around these 3 points, and I thought that was really helpful, and so I've borrowed his outline. Mm-hmm. Then you're off. That wasn't difficult. And one little sort of best practices that I encourage our students here to work on, even in their coursework and even in their preaching, is even if it's not a formal citation, if in your sermon notes, if you're borrowing from someone, just make note of it. Whether it's in a footnote at the bottom of your notes or whether it's in parentheses like Romans 3:22. Okay. So that down the road, if you decide to use this in some other written context where the expectations are much more stringent on acknowledging sources and that sort of stuff, that you're okay, that you're not violating those kinds of things.
Yeah. When is it appropriate to borrow an illustration? This has happened to me before, where I'm reading probably Tim Keller and come across a C.S. Lewis illustration from the Chronicles of Narnia, or a Tolkien story, or something like that. Where is it okay to say, like, oh, he used that? I could go out and read Lord of the Rings or The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and find that illustration myself. Is that an appropriate thing? Do we need to give credit?
I don't think, generally speaking, I don't think you would necessarily need to do that. Now, there can be I think there are ways that you can at least acknowledge that maybe you didn't come up with it without having to say, like, I got this from Tim Keller and
Sure.
his message this. You can say something like, I came across this illustration I thought was helpful. Like, you don't have to give author, title, page number in the context of a
Make
sermon.
sure everything's italicized correctly, get
Right.
the commas
Yeah,
in the
you don't-
right spot.
You don't
yeah.
have to do that. That's not necessary in a preaching context.
And I think, and maybe we can begin to move on a little bit, but I do think Karen Swallow Pryor had a good tweet about this, and she was talking about plagiarism of her students, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's out there,
Right.
where she said something to the effect of, our culture is really in love with being original and not well-read.
Right. Correct. And I think that in addition to those, you've got the same sort of motivations, right? You've got pride.
Sure.
I want people to think I came up with this really clever or impressive or deep thought or this structure, that sort of thing. So there's a pride issue that absolutely is going on there. And even if someone might say, well, I'm so busy, I don't have time to do my own sort of like deep dive into the text. To me, the response is, then you need to have a conversation with your elders or with somebody so that you can get some things off of your plate, because at the center of a continuous preaching ministry should be reflected in your time during the week, that is recognized as this is a primary focus of your ministry. And if you're too busy doing all these other good things, then we need to get some other people doing some of those things to free you up to do that.
Which the articles that we will link and we will cite that do defend preachers who do this oftentimes go to, they're super busy.
Right.
This is the only profession that you speak weekly. They forgot about us,
Right.
They forgot about the college professor, But yes, that seemed to be the pushback.
And I think that one really helpful thing to keep in mind is that good preaching is really ultimately God's word mediated through the person that is doing the communicating for a particular context. Mm-hmm. So just taking a message that your favorite pastor preaches to a different context, not only are you shortchanging yourself, you are also not serving well the specific people that God has called you to preach to, because you know them and that famous pastor doesn't. And so you're not feeding them in the way that you should feed them.
Yeah, I think it was Lig Duncan who said it at a panel discussion I was at. There's no replacement for a pastor who has bled with his people.
Yeah, and I think most people can tell over time of like, you yourself have not deeply engaged the text.
Sure.
It just feels different. So in any case, we need to move on to our athlete who wore number 3.
Yes. And we sort of have one picked out.
Yeah.
But some of our candidates that we've talked about, Babe Ruth, the Bambino,
Yeah.
I believe was his nickname. For
The Sultan of SWAT as well.
The Sultan of SWAT. I did not know that one. Ken Griffey Jr., who was huge when I was growing up.
Yeah, great player.
Dwayne Wade, a little bit more recent.
Yeah, for the Miami Heat, won several championships, was part of one of the original sort of, not dream teams, but like
super teams.
Super teams,
Yeah.
where you've got 2 or 3, him and Chris Bosh and LeBron in Miami.
Allen Iverson was another one.
Arguably the greatest basketball player 6 feet and under.
Yeah. That's such a specific category.
He was small but dynamic.
And then you have one that you want to throw out.
Well,
here.
yeah. So we got some pushback from Nate in Ohio about
Oh my goodness.
the fact that there were no Buckeyes mentioned in the previous discussion of wearing number 2, or any Mets mentioned for Sloat here, and so when it comes to wearing number 3, at least worth mentioning here, not in the same category as these others, but. Michael Thomas, the Saints receiver, arguably the best receiver in the NFL right now, one of the best, right? One of the 2.
I mean, has the catch record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He wore number 3 at Ohio State, so honorable mention too.
Does not wear it at the
Correct.
Saints, though.
He
Okay.
would not really be allowed to.
Yeah, I think we got to go with Babe Ruth. I really don't think we have much of an option.
Yeah, though it pains you as a Mets
It
fan to
hurts.
go
It
two
hurts
straight
me.
weeks with a
Yes,
Yankee.
and we were talking about this off pod, and the Yankees have a tradition of putting their greatest players, or who they think will be their greatest players, in those 1 to 9 numbers, in the top 10. And so I think we'll probably have more Yankees going forward. So we need to be intentional not to just pick Yankees, but I think we'll see. We'll see more Yankees, at least in conversation.
I haven't done the work for number 4 yet, but yeah, I think we probably need to make an intentional effort
not to have a Yankee.
I mean, Babe Ruth was.
It's hard to beat Babe Ruth, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how you can argue with him. Again, if we're thinking about historically great, all these other players are certainly worthy of mention and discussion, and there's probably more that we'll get some feedback from others who feel slighted on that. But what's one thing you like this week, John?
So I got something a little bit different. A few months ago, I came across an old book called On Liberty by John Stuart Mill. And he has, and I would recommend just the second chapter of what he's written. It's on free speech, I believe, but it's the second chapter. It's 7,000 words. It does not take a long time to read. And he advocates for free speech being a cornerstone of education, society, all these things, and presents very logical arguments that I really enjoy and would love to see our society really hold on to again. And
I imagine that given the age of that was written centuries ago. Right?
Yes.
That you can probably find it online.
Yeah,
version online.
I'll post a link. There's there's somebody's updated it, and just the second chapter has been published.
Gotcha.
So I'll post a link.
Okay. And for me, I'm going to mention a new podcast that I've come across that I've enjoyed, at least the initial episode. It's a podcast called Food Trucks in Babylon, which is a fantastic.
That's a great title. Yeah.
It's done by Patrick Schreiner, and there's another faculty, or at least staff member out there at Western Seminary in Oregon. So apparently we're competing for listeners out there, perhaps.
Of the bread-making community.
That's right. So, but their first episode was on Christians and marijuana, and they just released another episode on what do you do with the imprecatory psalms? The whole, I wish God would take the babies of my enemies and dash their heads on rocks, kinds of things. Like, what do you do with that? How do you handle that? So, that's worth checking out. But before I give our sign off, in the spirit of our topic, I have one very brief story, right? Okay,
oh my
so
goodness.
This is unscripted.
Yeah, I didn't know this was coming, so I don't know what's about to happen.
So I'm in my Greek 3 class, which you taught Greek 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And I concluded my first class period.
Am I being confronted right now?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking.
I
started sweating.
I completed the class and gave my standard sign off, which shows up at the end of every episode here.
Oh,
The Lord bless y'all real good. And they looked up with surprise, like, wait a minute, you got that from John Sloat.
No, I got it from you.
And I said, no. Now, he got that from me.
Yeah.
But I said, I got that from Don Carson.
Yeah.
And he got that from Billy Graham. So I'm doing my due diligence in light of our show topic to trace back the origins of this expression that I use here. So,
and that'll be the only time we do this. We don't need to do this every episode.
No. It's on record now.
Yeah,
and so in perpetuity from this point forward, that has been footnoted and acknowledged as coming from someone other than either of us. And so we have definitely wandered about our various and sundry topics today. And so until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.